rest is saved for his inner life, which I doubt anyone has peered very far into, perhaps he himself least of all. Driving him in my '56 Nash Rambler along the Pacific Coast Highway, a new album by Jackie McLean on the local jazz station, I began to consider the possibilities of following this elusive expatriate back to Tangier. As we made our way from the valley to the ocean, I heard about the trance dancing performed by the various Berber religious brotherhoods, the Berber music which Paul had taped for the Library of Congress some years before, the street life of Tangier and the Café Central, where foreigners sat day and night drinking mint tea and discussing the nature of the world, the month of Ramadan in the Islamic world, when all believers observe the long days of abstinence with a North African stoicism, and await the first bowl of Ramadan soup called harira, served from large boiling pots at sundown after the cannon is fired. I heard about Aisha Kandisha, a malevolent jinniya who makes those who gaze upon her go crazy. She has the body of a beautiful woman and the feet of a goat. And I heard about the little restaurant down the Atlantic coast in Asila, where you can sit in the sun and for a few dollars eat your fill of wonderfully prepared fish pulled from the water an hour earlier. Of course, Paul also profiled some of the more colorful Tangierines, those English second sons and other non-Muslims who inhabited the old mountain outside the center of Tangier. There was, for example, a peculiar Englishman who had a refrigerator in his living room that contained small vials of blood he had relieved from various young Moroccan boys, each labeled with the name of the boy: Mohammed, Ahmed, Larbi. These were offered to his guests. I was pleased to learn Paul was no drinker. 3 months after that pivotal night on the rim of the Pacific, I found myself stepping off the Algeciras Tangier ferry. I labored with my rucksack up to the Zoco Chico, small market, that housed the notorious Café Central, and just off the square I located the small hotel Paul had told me about, the Hotel Carlton. I dumped my things, changed dollars into dirhams, and set off in search of Amiable Atessa, Paul's apartment house in one of the outlying districts of the city. When I had spoken with Paul in L.A. about journeying to Morocco, he maintained that it was quite doubtful I'd actually come. Typically, he found it impossible to think positively about anything that had to do with the future. As a result, I imagined Paul's reception would be slightly more demonstrative than it turned out to be. He opened the door, saw me, and with a degree of subdued formality, and not a trace of surprise, asked me in. We sat down on the mutarba, the banquette that is there today, in the small, fading living room where Paul had propped odd primitive paintings by intense local artists against the pale walls. Off this room is a terrace, thick with plants and cages containing a variety of small, multicolored singing birds. Paul disappeared onto this terrace from time to feed the birds and water the plants, and, from what I could tell, look out over the Ain Hayana, the residential district just below his apartment. It was from the Dur Badr that numerous small fires sent up thick plumes of smoke, hazing the light of late afternoon and placing on the air the scent of wood smoke. When he left the room to get my lapsang tea that first day, Paul said, "Will you excuse me?" And to this day, after the nearly 25 years I've known him, he always offers me my lapsang in exactly this way, with a studied politeness, a considered distance. The longer I was in Morocco, the better I understood how this distance allowed Paul to live in comfort among the Moroccans and within himself. That afternoon of my first visit, Paul took me up the old mountain to see the cottages where Tennessee Williams had stayed earlier in the decade. Truman Capote had also visited Bowles during the '60s, as had Gore Vidal, and later the Rolling Stones, and many others. Then we walked to a cafe overlooking the Strait of Gibraltar, and while the freighters passed in and out of the Mediterranean, he told me tales of his boyhood. As the sun began to set on my first day in Tangier, we made our way to the large market in the Rue de Fez, where Paul was greeted by the owner of each small stall: the tangerine and apple man, the man who sold tomatoes and cauliflowers, the spice woman, the baker, the butcher. They greeted him in Maghrebi, the Moroccan dialect.